Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We are using an upgraded version of GoToWebinar, so I got a couple extra things to tell you today. First, today we're going to be talking about partnering with museums to enrich your community's story. With us today, we have Johnna McEntee, Jason Crabill, Erin Augenstein, and Jen Tinkler. So I'm going to introduce everyone in a moment, but just to do a couple quick housekeeping items with everyone. First, we got some new options up top for you. So if you have questions, don't use the question box. We've already learned this one the hard way today. Use the chat box and check the option that says presenters and organizers so all of us can see the question that you have. Um, and as we're going through, if you encounter any sort of audio or video disruptions, uh, just like in the past, close the webinar down, click the link that was sent to you, sign back in. Likewise, telephone, just call back in, and that should solve your audio issues. So to introduce our panel today, first up we have Johnna McEntee. Johnna has worked in the Museum Association field for over 20 years and is the executive director of the Ohio Museums Association, which she's held since 2011. Next up, in my lower right screen, might be different for you guys, is Erin Augenstein. She serves as the executive director of Campus Martius Museum and the Ohio River Museum in Marietta. And with her in the screen is Jen Tinkler, who is the executive director of Marietta Main Street. And finally, up in my top right corner, we have Jason Crabill, who is the executive director of the Decorative Arts Center of Ohio in Lancaster. So without further ado, I'm going to turn my camera off and open up the presentation for everyone, and we will get started. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. For those of you I haven't had a chance to meet, my name is Johnna McEntee, and I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio Museums Association, or OMA, as it is lovingly known in our world of alphabet soup. I'm very excited to speak with you today about how museums and Main Street organizations can partner together to help advance your missions and positively impact your communities. Thank you so much for having me. I want to introduce our panelists that you'll be hearing from as well, even though Devin just had that great introduction for us. So when we get the screen back up, we'll go to slide 2, Devin. Joining us from Marietta is Erin Augenstein, Executive Director of Marietta Museums, which also includes the Campus Martius Museum and the Ohio River Museum. In addition, Erin is also a member of the Ohio Museums Association's inaugural cohort in our Empowering Museum Voices Fellowship. Also with us today is Jen Tinkler, Executive Director of Marietta Main Street, and rounding out our panel is Jason Crabill, Executive Director of the Decorative Arts Center of Ohio and Lancaster. Jason is also a past president and former board member of OMA. I'll let them go a little deeper into their background once I turn the floor over to them, but I'm so excited to have these panelists here to talk about their work as museum and Main Street partners, how their relationships got started, and what they see for the future of their partnerships. On the museum side of things, we couldn't ask for a better team of Erin and Jason, as they bring unique perspective of having worked closely with both OMA and their Main Street partners, and they can share their experience on how we can be resources for one another. And I'm so glad to have Jen here as well to share that Main Street perspective. All right, next slide. I'll just do a brief word on my background, and Heritage Ohio so graciously shared my bio in the registration materials, so I won't go into all of that. But I will say I've been with OMA for over 20 years now, and I love working with organizations across the state, the region, and nationally to help museums and the people that work in museums in Ohio serve their public and be the best possible stewards of our shared cultural heritage. For those of you that were with Main Street organizations, I know that is your mission as well, so I'm looking forward to hopefully sharing ways we can work towards these goals together. I've put my contact information on this slide, and please don't hesitate to reach out if OMA can help connect you with museums in your area, or if we can be a resource to you in any way, because that's why I'm here. All right, next slide, please. So here is the agenda for things we want to cover today. I'm going to talk briefly about OMA, generally what museums do as far as programming and outreach to help get those creative juices flowing as we think about potential partnership opportunities, the economic and tourism impact of museums, and some potential grants or funding sources that might be available for partnerships between museums and Main Street organizations. Then I'm going to turn it over to Erin and Jen to talk about what's happening in Marietta, how their organization started their relationship, what they currently have cooking, and how they see their partnership growing in the future. And then we'll hear from Jason about the partnership between DACO and Main Street and Lancaster, how they work together, and how he sees the natural relationship between museums and Main Street. Then we'll all come back together at the end to give you plenty of time for Q&A with our fabulous panelists. So please don't be shy about putting any questions you have into the chat box as we go along. Don't forget to mark organizers and panelists. And I will do my best to get to as many of those questions as we can at the end of the presentation. So you know who our panelists are, you know who I am, you know what our agenda is. Who is OMA? What is this organization and what do we do? So to give you the official description, our mission statement, the Ohio Museums Association connects, educates, empowers, and advocates for the Ohio museum community. Practically, what that means is OMA is the professional organization in Ohio for museums and those that work in and for museums in our state. Our broad term of museums includes any organization that holds or shows objects in the public trust, whether those objects are inanimate like a painting or a vase or a historic document or clothing or farm equipment or even historic buildings, but that also includes animate collections like plants and animals. So at OMA, the museum umbrella includes history museums, art museums, science museums, children's museums, halls of fame, aquariums, zoos, botanical gardens, arboretums, nature centers, cultural heritage museums, specialty museums, historic homes. Basically, if they hold or exhibit objects in the public trust, we consider them museums and part of our constituency. And to this group, we provide professional development in the form of workshops, monthly webinars, an annual conference each spring, online interaction through social media and events like our quarterly virtual shop talk video chats, bi-monthly affinity group video meetups, career resources, networking, and connection to the larger museum community. Another important part of what OMA does is advocacy on a state and national level for issues impacting museums and in support of organizations and agencies that support museums, including the Institute of Museum and Library Services, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the National Endowment for the Arts, just to name a few on the national level, and Ohio Humanities and Ohio Arts Council, among others at the state level. I see my job as Executive Director of OMA as supporting the dedicated people who work in museums and to help museums be their best possible iterations, however I can. All right, let's go to the next slide. So for those of you who don't work in museums or who aren't familiar with what museums do on a day-to-day basis outside of curating exhibits, I want to give a brief overview of some of the general programs and activities that museums in Ohio have as part of their standard operating procedures. And hopefully going through this list will help spark some ideas on ways you might be able to collaborate with museums on your area on programs or initiatives that you might have in common or that are adjacent to each other. This is not a comprehensive list, but just a very brief and general rundown. So objects, artifacts, and exhibits. Of course, museums have things either in their collection, on view in exhibits, on loan to them from other museums, or out on loan to other museums. Across the country, museums hold more than 1 billion objects in their collections. So as you would expect, the care, exhibition, and preservation of these objects are a big part of what museums do. And I specifically want to call out the historic preservation of objects and locations for this crowd, as I know that's also a component of the work of a lot of your organizations as well. Conservation. So in the museum world, conservation takes a couple of different meanings. For our zoos and nature-based organizations, museums help save species. For example, in 2022, accredited zoos and aquariums spent nearly $217 million on field conservation projects in over 117 countries, benefiting over 1,000 species, including almost 250 listed under the U.S. Endangered Species Act. But other objects-based museums also do conservation and historic preservation work to help stabilize and ensure the longevity of the objects in their collection. Moving on to education, museums are, of course, education partners. Nationally, museums receive approximately 55 million visits each year from schools and school groups and spend more than $2 billion a year on education activities. With a sample of just 5 Ohio museums, over 2 million school children benefited from museum educational programming last year. That's more than 93% of all Ohio K-12 students and just a sample of 5 museums. The typical museum devotes 3/4 of its education budget to K-12 students, but museums have education classes available for all ages, from infancy to with baby and me programs, all the way through to elder care programs and every stage of life in between. Each year, museums nationally provide more than 18 million instructional hours for educational programs, such as guided tours, staff visits to schools, outreach through science vans and history on wheels and other traveling exhibits, and professional development for teachers. Ohio museums specifically are our school's education partners, helping to teach state and local curriculum in over 11 subjects like math, science, art, literacy, language arts, history, civics and government, economics and financial literacy, geography, and social studies. Okay, so community outreach. Community engagement, of course, is an essential component of the success of museums. By building strong relationships with local stakeholders and audiences, museums ensure that they remain relevant, inclusive, and vibrant centers of cultural exploration and education. So community outreach and engagement can take many different forms, like participating in community festivals, traveling or pop-up exhibits and experiences, volunteering at community events, outreach to underserved populations, and outreach to audiences that might not necessarily see themselves in museums, like, for example, an immigrant community in the area, special programs for those with dementia, Alzheimer's, museums acting as polling places and blood drive locations. The list really does go on. And I just want to highlight a few specific national outreach programs with robust Ohio participation. There's the Blue Star Museums Program, which is an initiative from the National Endowment for the Arts, where museums offer free admission to active duty military personnel and their families from Armed Forces Day to Labor Day each year. Over 2,000 museums across the country participate annually, including 35 museums that have already registered for 2024. And through Museums for All, an initiative from the Association of Children's Museums, those receiving SNAP benefits can gain free or reduced admission to more than 1,300 museums across the country, including 76 Ohio museums. I also want to flag America 250 Ohio in this community outreach category, and we'll talk more about that initiative with all of our panelists during our Q&A time, so we'll hold that thought for a minute. Event spaces. So many museums have event spaces available for meetings, galas, parties, and other gatherings and offer a unique setting for both special occasions and day-to-day events and meetings. And most, if not all, museums have some sort of gift shop or retail space, and many feature local products and items from small businesses in their area that connect with their collections or exhibits. Some organizations even have other retail spaces at their location or other community partnerships. For example, at the Maslin Museum, the Greatness Cafe, a local restaurant, opened their location in the museum. So the museum has the benefit of having refreshments on site for guests and can act as a gathering spot for the community without having to run a restaurant, and while partnering with a local business to the advantage of both organizations. And in Marietta, the museum acts as the local bookstore, and I know Erin will go into that more. These opportunities for partnerships are just a few examples of the things that might not be top of mind when you think of typical museum activities, but they fall into the scope of work that museums do every day. All right, let's go on to the next slide and we'll switch gears a bit and talk a little bit about the economic and tourism impact of museums in our local communities. In Ohio, museums have an annual $1.54 billion impact on our state's economy. Ohio's 10 largest museums alone have a combined operating budget of over $427.2 million, and museums in Ohio generate over $343 million in tax revenue to the federal, state, and local governments. Broadly speaking, arts and culture in the United States is a $704 billion industry, which makes up a little over 4% of the entire U.S. economy just in the arts and culture sector. Museums are also job creators, with nearly 26,000 jobs in Ohio supported by the museum industry annually. That translates to over $1.04 billion a year to Ohio residents in wages and other income. According to information from the American Alliance of Museums, more people visit American museums each year than attendance for all major sporting league events and theme parks combined. This was from a study done pre-pandemic, but even so, the total was approximately 850 million visits to museums versus 483 million total from theme parks and sporting events. So it's pretty safe to say that when people travel, both in-state and out-of-state, they will probably visit a museum during their trip. Tourism in Ohio is a $56 billion industry with over 238 million visits to our state each year. That is direct visitor spending at Ohio hotels, museums, restaurants, attractions, retail shops, etc. So this makes museums natural partners in attracting visitors to your communities and encouraging those folks to stick around before and after their museum visit to get a bite to eat, to check out the shops, to stay the night, to spend their dollars in your neighborhoods. And partnering with museums can help boost the impact of your outreach to these millions of travelers that are traveling to our communities each year. All right, I know you are eager to hear from our panelists. I'm almost done. I just wanted to touch on one more topic briefly, and that is potential grants and funding sources that might be available for partnerships between museums and Main Street organizations. On a national level, I'm sure you're all probably familiar with the Historic Preservation Fund grant programs from the National Park Service and grant programs available from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And if you aren't familiar, you can check out those links on the slide. But partnering with museums, that opens some avenues for funding programs that a Main Street organization might not hit the eligibility for on their own. And for museums, partnering with Main Street organizations on these grants often makes your applications more appealing to funders because it shows community buy-in, outside support, and strong partnership and relationship building. The National Endowments for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the Institute of Museum and Library Services all have robust grant programs. Specifically at IMLS, I think the Inspire grants for small museums, the Museums for America grants, and the Save America's Treasure grants, if they are available in 2024 and beyond, those specific grants are based on congressional budget appropriation, but all of those grants are great places to start. And on the next slide, at NEA, the Challenge America and Our Town grant programs might be of interest. On the next slide, and at the NEH, public impact projects for smaller organizations, public humanities projects, and media projects might be good fits, as well as possibly the Cultural and Community Resilience Program, depending on the project. I think those are all COVID-19 related. On the next slide, at the state level, again, all these might be resources you're already familiar with, but it's never a bad idea to take a fresh look at Ohio Humanities. They have 2 ongoing grant initiatives, Spark Grants and Ignite Grants. The Ohio Arts Council have several grants available, but of special interest to this group might be Arts Partnership, Arts Start, and Arts Next. And the Ohio History Fund, which is a crowd-funded competitive matching grants program, and applications are always due in September, so there is still time to get those applications in for this cycle. These grants and granting organizations are just a few examples, and I know there are probably so many more out there, but hopefully this inspires you to think about funding more broadly by involving museum and Main Street organizations as partners on these projects. So being able to make these connections and network with your fellow organizations that are all working towards community building is imperative to the work that we do as cultural organizations. And now I want to turn it over to our panelists to talk more about their partnerships and give examples on how to form and grow these relationships. So at this point, I want to invite Erin and Jen to pop on, and I will pass the reins to them.
Thank you so much, Johnna. Yes, I'm Erin Augenstein, and I am the director of Campus Martius Museum and the Ohio River Museums. I work for, if you're ready for it, Friends of the Museums, Inc., doing business as Northwest Territory Museum Society. So over the past several years, you've probably seen both names used. Know that Northwest Territory Museum Society is still us, and we're still the site managers for Campus Martius and the Ohio River Museum on behalf of the Ohio History Connection. Next slide, I believe. Yeah, there we go. So we're talking to you now from my office. The Rufus Putnam House is right behind that wall. So hopefully you've been to Campus Martius Museum before. If you haven't, we are the museum. Are you the museum with the house inside? Yes, we are the museum with the house inside of it. The house itself was built in 1788, and the museum was built in 1928. So the museum itself is now an artifact, as you could say. Campus Martius Museum, I'll say, first of all, the Ohio River Museum is currently closed. We are working to build a new Ohio River Museum. We got really great news today about a grant that we had already received, but we're ready to, right before you came, actually, I got an email that that we've got permission to proceed. So some news we've been waiting on just came through. But that museum is currently closed. The W.P. Snyder is a boat that's on the grounds down there. We also have the Snyder closed for this year because our contractor for the museum has also worked on the boat in the past. So they're going to be doing some of that work at the same time, simultaneously. Campus Martius Museum is, though, open 7 days a week. And I'll repeat that. We are open 7 days a week. We close 5 holidays out of the year. A little bit of a disclaimer. I am not a historian. I'm a nonprofit leader. I started off my career as an educator. I do a lot of communication. So we have a lot of historians here. I am not one of them. But I will say that managing a museum that is open 7 days a week to the public can certainly be challenging at times, but definitely allows us to have opportunities to work more freely with our local partners because we are used to being open every day. Just for reference there, admission is $10 for adults, $5 for veterans and youth over 5. Members are free. We are also a Blue Star. I'm glad you mentioned that, Johnna. We are a Blue Star museum. So any active military families are free for now from May through September, although we offer that year round. Our programming, we do have a monthly speaker series that we're going to expand to work a little bit more with our Main Street partners. We host school and tour groups year round. We have regular tours of the Putnam House as part of your visit here, but we also do special guided tours. We do have a gift shop, and as Johnna said, we are the only bookstore in town. We also have a great event space for renting. We have meeting rooms that you can use during the day. We have a great hall in the evening. I think the next slide. Trying to remember what's on them. Yeah, so I just wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of our total attendance by month. It's probably something that you would anticipate, but if you don't normally typically work with schools, it's important to know that for a lot of museums, I see Jason shaking his head, April is actually our biggest month, or May, depending on how the school year falls. Those are also our biggest gift store sale months because, if mom gave Jen a $10 bill in a Ziploc baggie and she came to the museum, I'm going to tell you Jen's going to spend every penny of that $10 that she can. So those are usually our really high sales months as well. And our bookstore carries, we carry books, we have like ornaments and logoed items, but we also carry a lot of sort of old-timey, old-fashioned toys. And that is really a lot of the source of some of that revenue too in April. And being here in Marietta, we also have some of the great river boats that go up and down the river that folks will take a vacation on in Marietta. Every passenger will always tell us that Marietta is their favorite place to stop. And when they do, they'll do like a hop on, hop off tour, and there's a bus that goes around town, and we participate in that. We also do have some other, we're starting some of our offsite programming as well. So doing some walking tours and some other ways to get folks more involved with the museums. Now, I will say, actually, can you go to the next slide, please? There we go. In 2023, by the time we started measuring zip codes, taking zip codes at the door in January of 2023, by the time we got to June, we had seen visitors from all 50 states to Marietta, and all of those countries by the time the year was up. So I've been liking to say lately that in 2023, we had visitors to Campus Martius Museum from 6 continents, which might not sound like a whole lot to folks in the museum world, but I'm a mother of 2 teenage girls, and they say, what? Someone came from Ecuador today to Campus Martius? And I always say, yes, and they didn't fall out of the sky. They came here with an intention and with a purpose. Sort of a side note to that, I am 7th generation Appalachian. My husband's 5th. We chose to raise our kids here. We know that our population is shrinking and our population is aging. And we know that there will not be any sort of large manufacturing company coming to save us here. So we've got to do our best to represent our communities and to increase revenue in our communities. And along with Marietta Main Street, we know that cultural tourism is incredibly important, not just for us as an individual museum, but for our community. So when someone from Ireland who's here on driving by themselves around the country, we meet a lot of folks from Ireland driving by themselves around the United States. They come and then they see us first, and then they say, where else can we go? We'll connect them to other museums in town. We'll connect them to parks and free places that they can visit. And then we'll also send them obviously downtown for lunch. What are they interested in? If they're interested in shopping, we're hoping that they'll stay overnight if we keep them busy enough and fill up their car with gas. So I think it's really important for a lot of us, especially in the smaller towns. Marietta's population is only 13,000, and we are the city. If you're going to the hospital, you have to come to Marietta. The college is here in Marietta. We serve a lot of different counties just for regular day-to-day life. But when folks are coming to us because they wanted to come see our town and they heard about it, it's really important for us to be able to capture them while they're here, get them interacting with our town, and then when they go away later and they tell their other friends where they went, they'll say that they visited Marietta and how much they enjoyed all we have to offer. I think I have one more slide after this. Yes, this just kind of leads us into Jen as well. I Another full disclosure, I stole this map from our CVB. We use this map a lot. This is just sort of a condensed version. I cropped it out. But this is sort of the some highlights of the CVB. You can see up at 5 and 6 up in the, I guess, northwest corner there. 6 is Campus Martius Museum and 5 is the Ohio River Museum. And we are 3 or 4 blocks away from the majority of our downtown area and our Main Street area. So we're outside of that a little bit, but we're really excited to begin our work with Jen and with Marietta Main Street. I think I'll toss to you.
Sure. My name is Jen Tinkler. I'm the executive director of Marietta Main Street here in town. And we're really starting fresh with our relationship with the museum. I know we have a lot of history here in Marietta, and Main Street has decided that here in the near future, we want to start emphasizing that with some of our programming. And there's no better way to start that than working with Erin at the museum. We're going to start doing, depending on how familiar you are with Marietta, we're going to start focusing on Rufus Putnam, who is obviously the first one here. And his house is, like Erin said, right behind that wall. So we're going to start working on that. And Erin has some programs that we're going to be working on with the museum as well. So I think it's going to be a very beneficial relationship for us. We already see a lot of people downtown shopping and eating who have come or are coming to the museum that day. The CVB sees it all the time, and we're always promoting all of our museums here in town. So it's a constant push to get people from there to here and from the museum back downtown. I'm sure you're seeing that as well.
Yes, it's really a lot of what our organizations do in town is we're really good at engaging our visitors in conversation. Mm-hmm. So when they come to the front desk and we start the conversation with, after we process their admission, what's your zip code? And then they tell us, this morning, we're from Seattle, Washington. Seattle, Washington, that's a long drive to get here today. And then we'll start a conversation with them. And then as they go through and perhaps do a guided tour of the Rufus Putnam House, we'll talk with the tour guide, ask questions. They're very good about that. Start to recommend a book maybe that we sell in the bookstore. Or if they say they're hungry, we'll start to recommend some restaurants. There's a lot of folks who, if they're here on a Friday and they're staying through Saturday, we'll recommend that they come to the farmers market, or that there are some other events happening in town. Oh, it's a First Friday. We've got a lot of First Friday events happening with Marietta Main Street. So we do a pretty good job of, I don't know if it's just because we're Appalachian, because we're small town, but we engage people in conversation a lot about why they're here and ways that we can help them extend their stay in the community. Yeah,
we do the same thing where the CVB and I push the book The Pioneers, and if you have not had a chance to read that yet, I'm getting into it now, and it's definitely a good read. But in that is, he talked about all these attractions that we now have around town, and we're constantly sending people to all of them, and then we send them here to see the house. So it's definitely a benefit to have the museum here in town.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Erin and Jen, for sharing all of those wonderful details. And I have lots of questions that I will save for our panel at the end. So at this point, I will let Jason talk about his relationship with Main Street in Lancaster and what is happening in that part of the state and with Deco.
Sure. Hello, everybody. I think I've been introduced 2 or 3 times now, but I'm Jason Crabill. I'm the executive director of the Decorative Arts Center of Ohio here in Lancaster. I don't have a bunch of slides, which is actually probably pretty good because a lot of what I was gonna say is a lot, I can pretty much say ditto for Erin's explanation of kind of how they work and where folks are coming from and all those sorts of things. We have a lot of similar patterns in that way, but I will just to frame who we are and maybe help guide what I'm going to say later. So the Decorative Arts Center of Ohio is in the heart of the historic district of downtown Lancaster. We're actually the last business public space in the Dora for downtown Lancaster, although we don't let people come in with their drinks to see the exhibits in the museum. We're in an old 1835 historic home. We are actually right next to another museum. We consider ourselves a statewide museum. It's in our name. The museum next door to us is the Sherman House, which is the birthplace of William Tecumseh Sherman, big Civil War hero. And so they are sort of a national museum, and so it's always interesting to compare our audiences to their audiences. There's a fair amount of crossover because if you come to one of us, you tend to then want to go to the other because we're close to each other. And in fact, downtown Lancaster is home to 4 museums in the downtown area, all within walking distance. And so we have a nice museum community within the broader downtown. And then there's another museum that's about a mile and a half away, a children's museum, the AHA Museum, that's a little bit, not within walking distance, but as part of the museum community here. And in our museum, we have an exhibition program. We do 3 exhibit cycles a year. We have an arts education program in our what was the we have an art studio space in what was the carriage house behind the museum in a separate building, and then of course we do architectural tours and all sorts of things around the historic nature of the house itself. We're free to the public. We are not open 7 days a week, but we are open 5 days a week. We're free to the public because as part of our founding principles, we were a museum, a community cultural space intended for everyone in the community. The reality is we're in not quite Appalachia. We're no longer in Appalachia. Somehow Fairfield County is no longer Appalachia. I don't know when that change happened. But we have a very rural population around us. We have a whole large percentage of the community that doesn't always feel comfortable in a big historic home or coming to an art museum. And so a lot of our work, and particularly our work with our downtown, Destination Downtown Lancaster, is really to find ways to be a resource in the community, whether folks come into our spaces or we go to theirs. And so a lot of our work with DDL, Destination Downtown Lancaster, is really working to connect us with other organizations in town, lots of social services organizations we partner with, the schools, all those sorts of things. Those kinds of, we rely on the downtown organization to help be a connector for some of those things. I'm not from Lancaster. I've been here at DACO, it'll be 4 years in July. I came in the middle of the pandemic, so the first year and a half of that was a slow roll in meeting people and being connected, and so the DDL really helps us break down some of those barriers and make some of those connections. From our side of things, we engage with DDL in all of the ways that they create opportunities for businesses in the downtown, right? The events that they put on are Saturday cinema outreach programs. They do shopping themed programs throughout the community, small business Saturdays and a chocolate walk through the community, shop hop, those sorts of things. We try to make sure that we're engaged when we can be. But then we also try to be, for lack of a better way to say it, a resource for what Destination Downtown Lancaster is trying to do among the businesses and the community, bringing folks downtown, making those connections. Erin and Jen talked about they get folks from all over the world, all the states in the union. We also do zip code, get folks zip codes to get a sense. We have similar. I can't say we got all 50 states last year, but I believe we got all 88 counties in Ohio. And for us, because we're about 45 minutes from Columbus and about 50 minutes from the Hocking Hills, what we offer to what Destination Downtown Lancaster does in terms of its communicating about the value of coming to Lancaster is, we advertise in the Hocking Hills and in Columbus that we're here, and we draw folks from all of those places. Folks in the Hocking Hills, maybe it's a rainy day and they've been there all weekend and they want to come to eat lunch in a city. They come to Lancaster. They know that they can spend not just an hour at lunch, but they can come to a free museum and see some art. And because there are 3 other museums within walking distance. We work with the Destination Downtown Lancaster, with our other museum partners to try to create messaging about the value of the opportunity, things to do, how to spend your time when you're in the community, in downtown, and then that extends to all of the other businesses in downtown, whether it's restaurants or the other things to do and see in downtown Lancaster. We also this summer, Erin and Jen talked about a project they're just getting ready to undertake. We have an annual fundraiser event, a big gala that we do every year. This year it's in June. And it's a pricey ticket, and we have a haute couture fashion show as the centerpiece. Fashion is a decorative art, so it's a nice connection. There's a lot of arts in our community. There wasn't a lot of fashion in our as part of the arts programming. And Columbus happens to be the 3rd largest fashion city in the country, behind LA and New York. There's some metric that they've got that demonstrates that. And so we do this big fundraiser fashion event. Because of that event, we have a business downtown that has just opened, and they're really great. It's called Gay Fad Studio. They do mid-century barware, glassware. They've really sort of taken things by storm. They now do business all over the country, but their brick and mortar shop is right on Main Street down the hill from us. They have identified that there is no such thing as a national mid-century barware convention in the country. There's lots of mid-century things out in Palm Springs and other places. They've decided that because Lancaster is a glass city, Anchor Hocking historically was here, that they are going to start a national mid-century barware conference in Lancaster. They're working with Destination Downtown Lancaster, and through Destination Downtown Lancaster, they're working with all the other businesses in town, because Lancaster doesn't have a convention center. Downtown is going to be where the convention happens this summer. All the businesses are going to take part. The Irish pub down the hill is going to become a tiki bar, and our fundraising event, the gala with the fashion show, is going to be the signature sort of Saturday night event for that weekend, and lots of other things happening with that. But it's through our partnership with with Destination Downtown, and because of that, through our connections with the other businesses in town, that the whole community is coming together to really create these kinds of opportunities. This is the first summer we're doing it. We'll see how it goes. I know we want to make it an annual thing, and I think it's going to be it's good for us. It's good for the business, and the downtown organization is really helping to make sure that all the parts are working together with that. The other thing I wanted to mention that is a partnership with our downtown organization, with Destination Downtown Lancaster, is the fact that we have 4 museums in town within walking distance. And so we're really trying to figure out, and we all talk, the directors all have lunch together from time to time, but we really are 4 separate entities, but really having conversations about how we can leverage all these cultural experiences and opportunities. In addition to us, there are other nonprofits. There's a place called Art and Clay on Main, which you can do art programming, and it is part of, works with the Department of Developmental Disabilities and employs folks with special needs, but they're a nonprofit as well, and kind of create a cohort of nonprofits, cultural organizations in the community. We all do our own things, but how can we market together? How can we work with downtown to get folks within the community, as well as in the surrounding areas regionally, and potentially broader than that, to see Lancaster as a place that where you can come and have that cultural experience. Johnna talked a lot about the numbers, about the economic impact of museums, and the reality is that we're nonprofit, mission-driven organizations. We run on, if maybe organizations have endowments, but most likely it's grants, it's program funded funded programs and those sorts of things, and partnerships. So I think most organizations like ours, museums, those sorts of things, are always looking for ways. We're mission driven. We are here to serve the community in whatever lens our mission sort of focuses us. And so any opportunity, at least in my experience, that we can partner with other organizations in our area, whether it's downtown or otherwise, helps us for all the reasons that partnerships do that, but also helps us fulfill our missions, right? Helps us do what we are here to do. And so if you are an organization, a downtown organization who has museums in your area and the museums are not as engaged with you, we're also all, probably like most all organizations, very understaffed. And so it is, if someone calls me and says, I have an opportunity I want to talk to you about, we are happy to do that as long as we can come together to figure out how the resources connect to the implementation. An example of that is actually the downtown organization made a recommendation to the county sheriff's office, which is downtown, to connect to us because they were looking for a partner they wanted to bring arts programs to the jail population. And they were working on a grant, and they couldn't actually, as a state agency, request the money. And they didn't have they were going to have to hire art teachers or whatever. So they connected with us. We are in a partnership through a grant with the Ohio Arts Council that the museum submitted in partnership with the sheriff's office, with the jail. And we send one of our teaching artists into the jail to work with the male and female populations weekly at the jail. And I did not realize this, but apparently it is a very rare thing for that kind of a program. There are lots of programs in prisons where the population's a lot more stable and people are there for 20 years to life or whatever. But in jails, there's a lot of, people are there for a couple days to a couple months, and there hasn't been a lot of focus on that. That partnership happened because our downtown organization, our downtown Destination Downtown Lancaster, helped us make that connection, because I would have that's what we're here to do, but it wasn't on my radar until they helped us do that. So there's a lot of direct partnerships that can happen. There's also a lot of just the relationships and being at the table. We go to every quarterly meeting that DDL has for its members. We, like I said, we try to be as present as possible for those kinds of opportunities, in addition to the more direct, like, we're now going to partner together with you. So that's kind of how we engage with our downtown organization, how the downtown organization utilizes us for the benefit of what they're doing for the downtown community.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jason. And I loved hearing from all of you about what's happening in your area. And the theme that really stood out to me was the thread that wound through everything that you all were saying, is this idea of collaboration and community partnership, and how all of your organizations are really working together to be the best possible hosts for your guests and visitors as ambassadors to your city. So I think that was a through line that I heard from all three of you. So at this time, we have lots of great time for Q&A from those of you that are here in attendance today. Don't forget to put those questions in the chat box, and at the tab at the very, very bottom, if you click on the caret and select organizers and panelists only, all of us will be able to see those questions as well. But as folks are thinking about those questions, I have a few of my own, and I had originally said, let's put a pin in talking about America 250, but let's take that pin out, let's talk about it right now. And so I would love to hear from the three of you. Have you all started thinking about America 250 events or activities yet? Do you have any ideas you want to share? Or for those that have not yet started thinking about America 250 celebrations, what advice would you give to get started on those initiatives?
Well, I would like to say before there's America 250, for us here in Marietta, there's Lafayette 200. So the American Friends of Lafayette are sponsoring the bicentennial celebration of Lafayette's Great Tour of the United States from 1824 to 1825. And he had planned just a few months. President Monroe invited him, and he ended up being in the United States for 13 months. So similar to the commemoration that was done by the Lewis and Clark Foundation a few years ago, the American Friends of Lafayette are sponsoring this year-long, 13-month-long event. So in August, it kicks off in New York City. I'm really excited to be able to participate in that, although also intimidated. But we'll be sort of retracing Lafayette steps. And so our date that Lafayette was in Marietta was May 23rd, 1825. So our commemorative date is Friday, May 23rd, 2025. Mark it on your calendars. It's the Friday of Memorial Day weekend. So we got kind of lucky with that. There are a lot of communities along the way. So every community just has their own day. So everybody does their own celebration and commemoration. Some are big gala events, some are smaller events. There are some communities I know in New England where he hit 4 or 5 towns in a day where they're doing 5Ks and bike rides and motorcycle, when the motorcycles go on their tours, those sorts of things. So, but some of what we're planning here, it's I'm on the national committee and I have a great local committee, but like most of probably everyone who's here today on the call, we're all doing all of the things. So we're really focusing on doing what we can, keep it simple, but keep it great. So what are we really good at here, Marietta? Well, we're great at education. So leading up to that day, that May 23rd, we'll have a temporary exhibit here at Campus Martius Museum. We're going to have some speakers leading up to the date talking not only about Lafayette and his role and his visit here to Marietta, but also about the great French connection that we have between our community and France that still exists today. There are companies that are based in France that have branches, I suppose, here in the region. And so we're really connecting with them as well. But one of the things we're sort of talking about doing is really sort of bolstering the French-speaking population and people speaking French in Marietta, and perhaps doing some signage throughout with our Marietta Main Street area. Doubling signage to be both in English and en français, having some events for people who are native French speakers or who are fluent speakers. If you are, you speak about 10 words of French, you can come in and we can, sort of gather together and you get to practice your French. Doing some of that with some of our high school students as well. So America 250 is still happening and it's still on our agenda here, but I think I'm on both of those committees, obviously, as you might probably assume. But I think a lot of what we're doing for Lafayette 200, it's going to translate really nicely 1 year later. Pardon the translate pun, but translate from French back to English in terms of small things that we can do well that then we can extend for America 250. So just like we're starting those Harmer Heritage walks with the boat passengers that come through, we're hoping to expand that then. And doing some different things with signage and involving everybody in that Main Street community in ways that they feel comfortable, so that we all do the small things that we can do, but do them really nicely.
That's excellent. And that is a great point as well, that even if you don't have the large national initiative like America 250, every community has events and days that they can commemorate, and using that as a time for those community partnerships just really lends itself well to the collaboration and the fellowship, the networking of making and building those connections. So that's a great point, Erin. Jason, what's happening in Lancaster with America 250?
Sure. So we actually, the museums in town and DDL and are sort of on the front ends of some of those conversations about what the community might do, particularly the downtown might do in celebration, attaching to what's happening at the 250 Commission state level, with all of the offerings they're providing for programming and other things. At our museum, the museum itself was built in 1835, 5 years after um, the last American Indian tribes were forcibly removed from Ohio. In in the Revolutionary time period, um, you know, Ohio, our part of Ohio was the West, and was a mix of white settlers and tribal folks. And so I spent 15 years before working at the Decorative Arts Center, working at the Ohio History Connection, and had worked with several of the federally recognized tribes with connections to Ohio, and so we're in preliminary talks about doing a contemporary um, an exhibition of contemporary native artists, primarily probably Shawnee, because that was the tribe that was most sort of in this area, Shawnee and Delaware, and really giving space to artists whose ancestors are from this area and would have been in this area at the time of the Revolution, um, uh, to have an exhibition uh, of art in our space. We're an art and history museum, and it seemed like a way to kind of honor, use the anniversary, and think about a different way to engage around the conversation. What that also does is it brings folks from other parts of the country, primarily um, Oklahoma, Kansas, Indiana, those areas where tribal folks are largely located, into Ohio, into Central Ohio. It also is slightly different from some of the more traditional America 250 celebration things that I think are going to be happening, which we're hoping will drive visitation to the area, and then all of the other things that are happening at the other museums and in the community around America 250 kind of offer some variety, but also some thematic elements. So that's kind of where we are with all of that, and really it's thinking about how can we engage with the topic, but in a way that doesn't step on other people. We're not repeating what other folks are doing, but kind of gives some space for some variety. So, but we are on the front end of talking in a more sort of communal way about how we all might work together, or how our pieces might fit together in sort of a more comprehensive community um, celebration, engagement around 250.
That's great. And for the organizations that haven't started working on those America 250 partnerships yet, or haven't reached out to the Ohio America 250, I would encourage you to do so. All of those folks are really great to work with, and they definitely want to hear from you. So you can get more of that information at america250-ohio.org. So that's America, the numbers 250-ohio.org. Okay, we're going to switch gears completely and talk about volunteers. So I want to know, as nonprofit organizations, the three of you, how do you engage your volunteers? And how can you work together as Main Street and museum organizations to help capitalize on the volunteers that you have been able to get your hooks in and engage?
I'll say, and I don't want to speak for you, Jen, but Jen and I have both been in our positions for about 2 years. So about 2 years post-COVID. So I think we're sort of, our organizations all had to take a little bit of a different turn. And, we both came in at a time when goal setting and sort of changing up how we do things was really important. And so one of the things that I've found, Johnna, I'm assuming you're talking about not just sort of getting new volunteers, but the ones that we have that have kind of like fading off the list, getting them back engaged. One of the things that I've found is that when I can partner, we haven't done this yet, but I just did this yesterday. We partnered with Marietta Memorial Hospital and offered a CPR program. I had written a grant to get an AED, and as part of that grant, I asked for a CPR program. And so we offered this free CPR training to all of our staff and volunteers. And some of the volunteers that came were not volunteers who have necessarily been here a lot recently working for our organization. So I saw that, the light went on yesterday, that I really saw that we don't just have to keep with what we do all the time for them, but we can offer other things to them that are community minded that they might be interested in participating in. Maybe they're just coming to get something for themselves. That's okay. I got them back in the door, and we're going to have some more, that gives us, like I said earlier, our staff's really good about engaging in conversation. So once we've got them back in the door, we can start talking about other things that are going on as well.
Great.
Yeah, for us, so the community of Lancaster has a very active community, particularly downtown. There's a lot of volunteer opportunities, but they tend to take on, cleanup, a day of cleanup where, for one day, hundreds of volunteers come to downtown and, swarm to clean up the neighborhood, or a special event where they need volunteers for a bit, Saturday cinema down at the square. And so there are those sort of programmatic volunteer opportunities. Or what we offer is a more regular, like someone who wants a Tuesday afternoon volunteer opportunity to greet people at our front desk, right? Or to docent our exhibit for 3 months, one or two times a week, or once every other week, or whatever. A little more regular type of volunteering, which adds some variety, frankly. I mean, in other words, we offer volunteer opportunities that are, and not just us. The other museums in town work sort of similar to us, right? But it creates a different kind of volunteer opportunity, so that depending on who the volunteer is and what they're looking for, they can volunteer with us or not. But what we found is that a lot of our volunteers are older. They tend to be retirees. They tend to have some time on their hands. But we also, through some of our partnerships with the schools and with the local regional campus for Ohio University Lancaster, we've been able to get maybe half a dozen younger volunteers who also come for those sort of regular things. And once they're volunteering with us, there are all those other things in the community that they get connected with for one-offs, for the summer, the Saturday cinemas or whatever. And because we have a table at Saturday Cinema and do some art projects for kids, and we do sometimes take one-off volunteers for those kinds of events that we often get from the pool that the Destination Downtown Lancaster has, where they assign volunteers. We've had some of those people turn into regular weekly or monthly volunteers for us for our programming. So we don't have we've got about 25, 30 volunteers at any one time that kind of rotate through. And I would like to expand our volunteer program, but as a core starting point, it works really well to be. That's how we get volunteers. It's also how people who are engaged in volunteering with us get to do volunteering in other parts of the community. And so it's I think the partnership works really well for that.
And I see my doom countdown clock. We've got just about 2 minutes left, but I have one question that I always love to ask folks. And so for Jen, what is something that you wish you knew about working with museums that you wish you would have known when you first started your job? And for Jason and Erin, what is something that you wish you knew about working with your Main Street partners or something that you know now that you wish you would have known when you first started working together? And that's how we'll end it today.
For me, when I started, I wish I would have known how to capture the history better, because there's a lot of events that we had that we could have incorporated that. And for whatever reason, the museum just didn't pop into my head. That I wish I would have known about that resource for some of those events.
For me, I will say again, coming in just 2 years ago, when I came in, our organization was not a member of Marietta Main Street or partner of Marietta Main Street, and was not a member of the CBB. And I just kind of stayed a little quiet about that for a while, or Chamber of Commerce, I'm sorry. We were CBB, but not Chamber of Commerce and not Marietta Main Street. I stayed quiet. And then one time at a board meeting, I said, so is there a reason? It's a small town. There could be a reason. Is there a reason that we're not members of those? And the board members all looked around and said, I don't think so. So I waited too long. I should have asked that immediately, probably even in my interview. But once I did, we're now, we're now in the mix of the things as well. So I think waiting to ask the question too long was my problem there.
Yeah, and mine is sort of similar, but like I said, I came in the middle of COVID, so everything had shut down, and we were slowly opening back up. And I sort of had an assumption that some of the natural partnerships and various other like easy low-hanging fruit kind of opportunities to connect existed, and we were just waiting for them to reappear, right? And what I came to find out is, in a lot of cases, we sort of like Erin, why? Well, I don't know. It's like you just have to be intentional and do it, and not, I guess, assume that it'll happen or it's happened. So it's about being intentional about it, taking those steps, those first steps.
Excellent. I think that is a wonderful place for us to end, and I see that our clock, we have reached the top of the hour. So I want to thank Heritage Ohio so much for inviting us here to speak with you all today. I hope that you are, as attendees, got some great information, got some good ideas on ways to collaborate and work with each other, both Main Street organizations and museums. And like we were saying at the end here, it's never too late to start those partnerships, to ask those questions about getting involved with each other's organizations. We're all here to, and those of you that have heard me speak before have heard me use this metaphor, we're all here to push that same rock up the hill as cultural organizations and organizations that serve the public. So let's use each other as resources, because we're all here to help each other. Thank you all so much. And if there's anything that OMA can do to be a resource to your organizations, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.